Hi everyone, and welcome to the podcast again. Today, someone that I've known for a long time in my roles, Dr. Ian Horsley. So I'm very interested to hear a little bit more about how he got started in physio and finding out a bit more about his work and how he's developed his career from there. So firstly, Ian, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for the opportunity. You know me, I'll speak at the opening of an envelope. You'll have your job to get me to shut up, I think.
That's the idea. No, that's absolutely fine. So Ian, again, we've known each other for a long time, but I've never asked you this question. How did you get into doing physio in the first place?
Well, as you can see by the colour of my chin, it's a long time ago that I got into physio, and it was literally a lucky break that got me into physio. I was at Liverpool University doing a prelim year, hoping to get on to do medicine, and I was playing rugby league for the university, and during the game I actually broke the bottom of my back. I ended up with a bilateral pars fracture at the bottom of my back that took a while to be diagnosed because I had leg pain. I was treated for my leg for a bit, and then I was treated. I was in a full body plaster cast for 12 weeks and was managed weekly by people. And while I was looking at my management, I was watching what their doctors were doing, and I was there thinking, well, the doctors haven't done anything. All they've done is organise my treatment. So, I saw a doctor who says, have an X-ray. The X-ray was read by somebody else who got the results. He said, yes, this is what we're going to have to do. I went to a plaster technician who put my plaster cast on. Then when I came out of plaster, I had a physio then who actually did stuff with me and got me right. And I thought, you know what, this is more about getting, what I want to do is to help people this way and get involved. And so again, at that time, one of the lads who lived on my corridor, his girlfriend was at Withington Hospital training to be a physio, and I chatted to her. And then, as I say, I applied to physio and luckily got in through clearing the next year. And just by, as I say, again, another total fluke, I ended up at Withington Hospital. And that's where I started my career in physio.
So you were actually doing a different course at the University of Liverpool then?
Yeah, so I was doing physiology, and there was the top 5 students at the end of the year, if you wanted, had the option of transferring to do medicine, and that's what I really wanted to do.
Right, okay. So it was purely that injury then, that was the complete catalyst for it?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
No, that's interesting. So, and then from there then, when you decided to do physio, at what point do you start figuring out, even now, when do you figure out what your career path's going to be or where you want to go into?
I've considered this a lot and been asked a lot, and it's almost been written for me. So I didn't, even though I always played sport, I didn't have any intention going down the sport route. I wanted to go down. Actually, I thought I might want to be a paediatrics physio. And when I was in my second year placement at Withington, and I was on outpatients, the local rugby club, who used to be quite good then, Broughton Park, just came and said, can we have a physio for our club, please? Preferably somebody who knows about rugby. And the senior on outpatients just came and said, look, none of us here know about rugby. You know about rugby, and you're doing really, really well on your placement. Do you want to go down to Broughton Park and be physio? And so I went down there. There was nobody, there was no doctor, there was nobody else who had physio. They had no kit, and basically, all right, you're our physio, get going. And they were a good club, and I learned on the job. It inspired me to read more and do some courses as a student, which ended with them in the week before I took my final exams, actually going on rugby tour with them to Portugal, and then having to rapidly sober up in time for my exams when I got back. So that again, that was just happened, sort of fell into my lap.
And you're known as one of the foremost physios looking at the shoulder. So is that where you developed that passion or interest?
It sort of progressed from there. So again, a lot of other, whatever coincidence, serendipity. I was at Broughton Park, and when I was doing all right at Broughton Park, and through rugby, Kevin Murphy, who worked in Manchester, was the then England Rugby Union first team physio. I got to know him, did a little bit of work with him, and then when I qualified on an evening, I was working in a private practice, and won an England under-21 international was there, getting treatment, who I treated, and then I decided I was going to move back home to Yorkshire, which was right near his club, which was Wakefield. I got to Wakefield, they rang me and said, "Oh, we need a new physio." I was at Wakefield Rugby, I ended up at Wakefield Rugby Club. At that point, the North Division of rugby, when we used to have 4 divisions, trained there. One night, their physio didn't turn up. They said, "Will you do it?" I got the North job. The doctor I had then for that season became the England first team doctor. And then the next season, he offered me a job with England Rugby. And I started working with England Rugby. And in 2003, this is a very long answer to your question, but we're here now. In 2003, England, the RFU started its injury audit. And as part of its injury audit, with the first stats that came out was shoulder injuries were prevalent. And excuse me, my dog's gone mad because his mum's gone out to work. Shoulder injuries were prevalent, but the most important stat was the high recurrence rate of shoulder injuries in rugby, and that's what interested me then. And then at the time, I would back up in Yorkshire, I was working with a shoulder orthopedic surgeon specialist who said to me, "Well, then there you go. Then why don't you find out why that happens?" And brought me a load of files in. Said, "Right, these are all the rugby players that you've looked at, I've operated on, and you rehabbed. There's your data. Go off and do a PhD. It'll only take you a year, and and get on." Anyway, was it 8 years later I finished it. So.
Right. We know how much that physio and medicine has changed in sport, but how have you seen that change from a general physio perspective? Like, what was it like when you were studying and going into practice?
There's been a big shift. I think and you can argue, because when I trained and I qualified, my first qualification, it wasn't a degree, it was a graduate diploma, and so it was just as we started to get the transition from that. I trained at a school of physiotherapy and not at a university. Admittedly, Withington School of Physiotherapy was associated with Manchester University, but my qualification is from Withington Hospital, not from Manchester University, and then it transitioned into a degree. So I don't know whether that suddenly then gave it a little bit more kudos from there. Certainly, I think it's been more expectant on physios to do research and go on and do postgraduate stuff, do a master's. It's very, very common now. But when I qualified, there was none of that sort of pathway. You've got your qualification, you should be thinking about doing some research or doing a master's degree or things. So we're very much sort of passive. But certainly over the 30 years I've been qualified, lots of research, lots of high quality research done by physios. And that has given the profession better standing, and in lots of areas, physiotherapy and physiotherapists are leading the way in treatment of all sorts of different kinds of disease, not just sort of musculoskeletal stuff. And I think that's enabled, certainly now a little bit of a change in that hierarchy, being I can remember when I was at Withington on our orthopedic wards, we had 5 different hip orthopedic surgeons. We'd have all one side of the road. There might have been probably about 14 beds on that side of the ward, and sort of 3 or 4 from each patient. And they all had different post-op protocols. Some were like, you're out of bed after day 2. The furthest one over, you're in 10 days before you can get out of bed. And patients are saying, "Well, why are you him up there? He's had his op on the same day as me, and he's been up walking a week, and I've not got out of bed yet." And and trying to discuss, with the various consultants, saying, his patients are up at 2 days, and his outcomes are good. Your patients are up at 2 weeks, and your outcomes are exactly the same as him. Why do you stick in it? Well, you're a physio. I do the surgery. You get on with it. But I think this. Working together, and being a bit more patient-centered, we this sort of symbiotic relationship now. What we often say to some surgeons is, what we will do, we will make your surgery look brilliant, because if we rehab it properly, okay, your outcomes will be great. It's not just going to be the surgery alone. So I think we work better closely and have more respect in the profession as well. And there's some lots of great people, prominent physios throughout the world in different areas. But there are a lot of well-known physio names within the UK that people sort of aspire to and see what they're doing and think, well, yes, I can be a Andrew Jaggi, I can be a Joe Gibson, a Jeremy Lewis, or whatever.
Yeah, and so those names that you mentioned there, so how do you collaborate with them? How do you guys come together? Is that through research? Is it just through the network?
Yeah, I think again, certainly, we've all got we're all working the shoulder sphere, but I think agreed amongst us, we're all stronger in certain areas than another, and we all we're all sort of members of the same club, so we're all members of the British Elbow and Shoulder Society, BESS, so we obviously connect and network through there. I don't think Jeremy's a member of the European Society of Shoulder and Elbow Rehab, but certainly Andrew and Joe and myself are members of that. And then, it's just, generally when people, if you go to conferences or you speak internationally, there'll generally be, if there's a shoulder bit, there will generally be one or other of these people there, plus if I'm there. So you generally bump into them because you're speaking at the same conferences when people are talking about shoulders.
And is that the case from an international standpoint as well? Like, is there a good close-knit network that you mentioned, the European Society there?
Yeah, so then you've got like Ankles, who's done loads, from Belgium, and has done loads of stuff there. So and over there, there's Angela Cadogan from New Zealand. There's Tim Earle in the States. So we all know each other, and because we're sort of more research active, and because of that, you communicate with each other. You're quite happy to drop somebody an email, unsolicited email saying, I want your advice about this, or what do you think about this, or I heard you on a podcast. Can you I can't get hold of the paper that you mentioned. Can you get that? So yeah, so we do chat, as I say, because we're all passionate about what we do, and we are passionate about improving the standard of physiotherapy, but definitely improving the standard of physiotherapy care around the shoulder girdle. And I should say elbow as well, because use as an upper limb thing.
So is there any level of competition between you guys in terms of the research that you're putting out there?
I don't think there's any competition. The main thing is to be aware, so you're not replicating, spending a lot of time in research only to find out just as you're about to think, oh, I'll get this published, that 2 weeks before somebody else has done exactly what you're doing with it. So we keep abreast of each other. So no, I wouldn't say that there's any competition. As I say, we've got sort of different spheres that we work down. Andrew being down at Stanmore, with all those complex cases around there, looking at those, and Joe looking a bit more into the sort of how the brain affects it, and using functional MRI and from that. And then Jeremy's just a publishing research machine, very, very clever, very, very clever, and renowned for putting questions out there, writing some nice editorial pieces. How what should we call shoulder pain? Should we get rid of manual orthopedic tests around the shoulder because the research is not very good for them? And then I spend most of my life working with an elite population, and again that's massively specialist around there. So the population I see and the facilities I have are different to what you get outside of elite sport.
Talking about the elite thing that you work with, then, so English Institute of Sport, how did that role come about?
Again, would you believe it? Just luck. So the person who was the regional lead physiotherapist from EIS. Ended up being a mine. He moved up from London to work as a physio with Barnsley Football Club, and he moved into the next village to me, and we had a mutual friend who introduced us. He left Barnsley Football Club, got the job at the Institute of Sport, and then one day offered to take me out for a beer, which I thought was a bit suspect. And he said, look, I've accepted a position in New Zealand, and I can start as soon as I can get rid of this job at EIS. If I can find somebody to take my role with a job at EIS, they said they'll release me as soon as that happens. So I said, oh, I'll speak to them, though I don't have much time. I had an interview at EIS, and originally I think I said I could do 12. I could only do 12 hours a week because I was working in private practice and still doing England rugby stuff then. And I started there 12 years ago. I'm now doing 30 hours a week and still working full time in private practice. The England rugby stuff's gone now.
So what was the role that you went into at EIS then?
So it's like regional lead. So you were like head physio for the region. And at that point, we had there were 6 other physios working with sports around there. So you were just sort of senior physio and just managed everybody, and then we're responsible for the budget, so purchasing and things like that, managing all the boring stuff there, managing leave and absence and illness and things like that.
Right. And which regional site was that?
That was it. So, which is ridiculous because the nearest EIS centre to me is literally 15 minutes down the road in Sheffield, but I slept over. It's there and 90 minutes back every day because my base was Manchester when I originally started.
Right. And how do you find that then? So you're a physio. Like, what experience did you have about managing a team, managing budgets, managing all the HR stuff, basically?
I've had a private practice for 20 odd years now. So I've got staff. I've got staff and therapy staff there, then with admin staff there. So I don't manage the admin staff now. I've got a practice manager who manage that, but I've got a group of staff there that I manage from there, from an upskilling and mentoring side of things. I had 4 years when I was a lecturer at Salford University. So from that education side, sort of mentoring and teaching, we use that quite a lot, which gave me a lot of experience. And then the other bits, the budgeting, it was quite easy for me being a Yorkshireman. The idea is if you give you some money, don't spend it. And if you're going to spend it, wait until the best moment. Okay, so hold on to it until the January sales come and see what offers you can get on for your money.
Yeah, that's why I never like negotiating with you for that very reason. So that obviously makes sense that you're doing back in action. So you're running that alongside it. So how do you prioritize your workload with that? So it's a big practice you've got over there. It's expanded a lot. But how do you maximize your time?
To say, I'm quite lucky. I've got a practice manager, and the practice manager is my wife. So for most of my time, I operate there just as a physio. Everything's managed for me. I go in, I see my patients, and then within that, I have dedicated time with each month with each member of staff to do some CPD, and then we do a monthly group CPD session from there, and then we can do ad hoc bits. So sometimes we'll do a joint consult with a difficult patient if one of the other physios wants me to go in. So I am quite lucky now that, as I say, all I really have to concentrate on is just going into work, seeing my patients and managing that, and not having to worry about all the other bits and pieces, the ordering, the finances, chasing up the bills or anything like that.
But when you were setting the back in action up, then what was that? How did it start out?
And again, it was a weird thing, and this, you keep saying this. The practice I now own, I used to work at. So I worked at it as an associate for about 8 years, and then I left to do to take up teaching at Salford University. And then about 3 years later, I got a phone call from the owner of the practice. I said, "Oh, I've not seen you for ages. Come and see me." So I went to see her, and she said, "Look, I'm looking to retire now, and so I'm going to have to sell the practice, and I'd like you to think about buying the practice, because I know you've been doing a little bit of private stuff around Wakefield. So I think it makes sense if you thought about buying the practice." And this was something like the Thursday before the August bank holiday, and I said, "Okay, I'll have a think about it." So I came home, I had a chat with my wife, and my wife's like, "Well, it's a massive, it's a big old house in like a third of an acre of land. It's a fortune to buy them." And we're like, we'll never be able to do that." And then literally on the bank holiday Monday, I got a phone call from the person's best friend who said, "Oh, she died at the weekend, and she's put in a will that everybody's got to do everything to make sure that you buy the practice." And so basically, I was sort of railroaded. An accountant rang me. Everybody rang me. It's like, we've all been told that we've got to do everything we can to get you to buy the practice. So again, sort of steamrolling into that a little bit, and again a little bit fortuitous getting some funding for that.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah. So how do you feel then when you realise that's going to happen by the sounds of it? So like, what's your process then? Because taking on a business, it's a massive.
It would have been difficult. Again, at the time, my wife was nursing manageress for a chain of vets. So from their sort of business management side, that was easy for her to take on that role. So she was still working at their vets at that time, and then sort of practice managing the practice for me. And then, once we got up and running properly, then she sort of just transferred full time to running the practice. So, they used to have about 40 nurses and 20 vets and all sorts of ancillary staff that she used to manage. So it wasn't much of a stretch for her, just changing over to managing some admin staff for us and some therapists.
So, I mean, forgetting this year, because we'll come on to that separately, but how have you seen the private practice world of physio change in that 20-year period?
It's very competitive, lots, when the practice that I now own, that was established almost 50 years ago. And that was, it's in Wakefield, West Yorkshire, and that was virtually the only physiotherapy practice in Wakefield, and one of the few in and around West Yorkshire. But over the time, more and more practices have opened from there, because people I've seen it as convenient really to do that. Some of them, some of the quality of the practices I'd have to question really whether they're suitable to be that. People working out of the bedroom or the dining room in the house and things. But yeah, so much more competition, and also I think that there's been that big increase in people taking private medical insurance. So again, that gives more scope of people using the private medical insurance to come and have physio. So again, that you've got a bigger cohort of people who are looking to have treatment. And then then in addition to that, there's been that opportunity to tender for sort of bigger commercial and NHS contracts, really, which we haven't done at our practice, just because we want to separate the NHS and private work. And if we've got people coming both lots, it gets a little bit lost about what we do and where we sit in the market.
And how is this year, in terms of COVID, how has that changed the way they operate?
Has it changed? I thought I worked a lot before COVID, but since we've reopened, we were shut for 16 weeks first time around with COVID, and we just agreed, we just taken out a massive loan before COVID hit to have a new roof put on the practice and have all the inside of the practice renovated. So that nearly killed us from there. So basically since we've opened, we been spending more. The plan was this year for me to step back a little bit from the stuff I do in private practice, but the opposite's happened since we've come back from there. So I'm probably doing 10 hours a week extra now in the practice to what I did before COVID. But can't grumble, as my wife keeps telling me. You had 16 weeks sat on your backside at home doing Teams calls every day, all day for EIS.
Yeah, no, exactly. So how do you see the landscape going forward then, if we just focus on the private side now? How do you...
I think there's a lot of good things. I'm a member of Physio First, the organisation for private practitioners in there, and their quality assured practitioner and quality assured practice side. I think that's really, really good for their, and certainly obviously you've got to be a member of Physio First to be able to go through that process. But I think, if that could become a standard across private physiotherapy in this country, it would be good then, because again, physiotherapy, it's like hairdressing, isn't it? Hairdressers are hairdressers, but some hairdressers are better than other hairdressers. They all do their similar training, but some people can cut hair better or dye hair better or whatever. And that overarching term physiotherapy doesn't, even chartered physiotherapy doesn't guarantee a standard of delivery or a minimum standard at the, that you've got at the practice. So going forward, I know Physio First are sort of talking to insurance companies about that, and whether that becomes a standard, so that the insurance companies are sort of guaranteeing their members are getting the best available level of treatment. But on the other side, with the private medical insurers, trying to cut premiums and say costs, the amount of arguments that I have to have with insurance companies about fees that I charge, that's just wasting time. And it creates some difficulties for patients, because there are some insurance company that won't pay my standard fee for seeing people, and it's not a lot. It really is not. It's not a lot, and I know there are physios who are much less experienced than me, much less qualified than me, who are able to charge more because they sit in a better postcode than I sit in. So that annoys me a lot, really. But it's what it is, and I keep fighting my corner, so we're doing all right.
So in terms of that, then, how would you see that the kind of the tiering system? I shouldn't use the word tiering.
Yeah.
But how would you see that from a physio standpoint? How would you see that being assessed?
Yeah. So my argument is with the companies is, look, using geographical postcodes, there's just no basis like, so I live in Wakefield, but I literally have patients coming from all over England and Europe to see me. Okay, so do I adjust my fees to their postcode to make it, because the patients who come from London, I could charge double, and they'd happily pay that if I had a London postcode for that. So what I put to them is that then, why don't you have a system based on competency really, so time qualified postgraduate education with it, that would make more sense. I'm not saying, let's say the company said, well, the most we're going to pay anybody, let anybody charge is £50 per session. I would say, okay, so that means the people who tick all the boxes, who are the best physio, according to you, that's £50, and everything go back on that, and that makes sense. But when I've got a PhD and been qualified 30 years, and I know people who have been qualified 6 years are able to charge 50% more than me, for delivering a lesser service in a lesser clinic and everything that goes with it. Because it's not just me. We've got a big clinic, big car park. We've got 8 admin staff. We've got a gardener. We've got a cleaner. We've got all the insurances. So it's not just me getting that money. It pays to run the clinic. So just trying to get some sort of standard that you can reference against and say, oh, well, yes, because if I answer my phone, make my own appointments, then a massive chunk of our expenditure is on our admin staff. From there, I could get rid of all those, but then it's a lesser service to my patients because I'm stopping in treatment, answering the phone, booking things in, getting behind because I'm having to book things, take money or whatever. So I think there could be a more transparent system that they could use for setting fees.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that at all. So going back to EIS, so you've been with them for 12 years. So how have you seen the progression from there in terms of the massive success of London? But how was it? What was it like before London in the lead up?
I think we're constantly evolving here. Certainly when I started there, that where we sat, our main sort of raison d'etre seemed to be, from a physio aspect anyway, was treating injuries. Okay, so managing injured athletes. And then certainly after the sort of the audit and review after London and looking at the athlete availability, so the athlete injury data, we had this flip that our role is to maximise athlete availability. Okay, so prevent injury and optimize their training. So our focus has shifted completely. So we spend a lot of time and a lot of effort trying to prevent injuries, working interdisciplinary with the other specialities that we have in the institute to plan and build the most robust athletes that we've got. So that's a big change, and so there's a lot more sort of navel gazing research and communication of seeing what works. And again, every athlete is a speciality. They're an N=1 case. So rather than having these overarching, this is what you do if you're a kayaker, this is how you'll train if you're a rugby sevens player. We need to look, we started to look at every individual athlete. Yes, they've got a rough outline of what their training will look like, but then we can make it bespoke for that athlete of that sex, of that age, with that injury profile at that time of the season, really. So there's a lot more thinking and preventing stuff. So we are spending less time treating acute injuries. Okay, we might be managing and rehabbing stuff, and it is trying to get them off the bed and into the gym for rehab, being more rehab therapists rather than just sticking people on the bed and treating them, though that is necessary at certain times.
So how do you work with, like, if you identify someone, Anthony Joshua, for example, then who you can see, right, he's got a great chance of winning gold. Does he get more resource than other areas? That would seem to make sense.
Yeah, I mean, the funding, ultimately the sport, owns the athlete and they decide the funding. And then as, in a normal cycle, you've got a big base and lots of athletes in there. And as we get towards the major games, that gets narrowed down. And then, you've got podium athletes, so the ones who are nothing's guaranteed, but virtually guaranteed to get a medal. They're top of the tree. Then you've got the ones below a podium potential, so they could get one, and then the lower one. So it's stratified then. And as we get to a major event like the Olympic Games, then you start to just narrow down and you just focus on your podium, your games athletes. They take priority, and then if you've got some free time, you'll see everybody else as well.
And how do you find that process where you're looking at a very, very specific thing for even on that prehab side? How do you find that process?
It's interesting because athletes are different, and some athletes are brilliant to work with because they just want to be successful, and they will do whatever is required for them to be successful. Then you've got the ones who are sort of naturally talented but a bit lazy. Well, I'm a bronze medalist. Why should I do a little bit more? I've got a medal. Why should I try harder? I'm happy with what I've got. And then you've got the ones who are just don't want to do anything. Why? Can't you do that for me? Can't you stretch me off? Can't you, instead of foam rolling, can't I come in and have a massage? Isn't there anything else I can do instead of this? It is amazing, the difference in athletes, really. And there are athletes who you see who are coming to, you thought, oh, it's great because, I'm going to have a really good time because I'm going to be able to try things with these and they're going to be receptive and we'll work together. And then there's some where you see and you're like, oh my God, are they going to come in? I know what it's going to be like. I'm going to have to keep saying the same thing. Look, you have got to do this. No, I am not going to do it for you. Yeah, from that. So it's, they're all different. And part of the, I suppose the look for me that I've been in the Institute for 12 years, you do start to develop a relationship with people, and and it's something that I've learned in my career in sport. Is yes, it's nice to be nice to the medalists now, but it's much better to be nice to the ones who are just coming onto the program, because in 4 or 8 years' time they'll be the medalists, and if you can look after those and make them feel as special as the current medalists and world championships, they're great to work with, because they realise that and they work and it's all you've helped me get me to here. Yes, and we have great relationships with them.
So you get their buy-in at an early stage, and that makes a big difference. What's the team mentality like in AIS? Because mainly it's a lot of it is individual sports. How does that compare to working in rugby or football?
Yeah, I mean, again, different sports are organised in different ways. So a number of our sports are now centralised and will train in one area. That makes it better. So everybody is together to deal with things. But some are still quite disparate around the country and will only centralise occasionally. So take squash as one of the sports. They come together infrequently for a training camp now. They used to be centralised, and it was easy to see the athletes, so that they're managed in the regions, and then they'll get back together. So it's often difficult to follow an athlete. So they may be on a training camp in Manchester, get an injury, you'll treat them for the week while they're on the camp. Then they will go home and they will access their nearest EIS facility for treatment. But unless you actively search through their notes to see what's happening, you might not know what's happening. You don't even know whether they have actually gone when you've said, oh, you need to go to the nearest EIS site and get this managed. You don't know whether they have done until they come up next time and you find out they didn't bother, and they've still got that ankle injury. So different sports are managed, managed differently. And again, it all depends on, because our job is to serve the sport. And so we've got to do the best we can for that athlete based on the limitation that the sport allows. And so it could be, again, part of our job is to say, is to make athlete availability, reduce injury. And we may, you may highlight some training technique or protocol that they use that when you look seems to be related to a type or a spike in injuries, and then going and identify. So I've looked at this, and this seems to be the case, that bit of training you're doing there seems to be causing all these injuries. Okay, so what do you think about training that so that you can reduce injuries? And some coaches are like, no, it's very important that specific bit of training we do is very important for the development of those athletes. So thanks for telling us, but no, we're just going to carry on. And some might, okay, what can we do? How can we work together around there? So again, it depends, and we have physios who are embedded in the sport. I'm not embedded in any sport. I oversee as a technical lead, I'm involved in every sport, but that means I don't get to make really good relationships with coaches and performance directors, except of a couple of sports where I tend to be in quite a lot, because they get quite a lot of shoulder injuries with it. So if I'm having to randomly I'm brought into a sport because they've got a difficult injury or a spike of injuries, and then I have to go in and see a performance director or coach who's never met me before, and it's like, what are you coming in here and telling us how to do whatever? So it's learning how to approach that, or and getting the lie of the land from the embedded physio who will say, well, that coach is a little bit difficult to deal with. This is the best role, or whatever.
And so in terms of those, whether you call them power struggles or not, but does that go on a lot? Like, who has the final say on those things?
So ultimately, it should be it's informed consent, and the athlete needs to know all the pros and cons of everything that's been asked of them. And ultimately, the athlete should make the decision whether they're going to train or compete. Okay, that's how it should be. But we know it's not often, a lie. It's sometimes not the case that they are persuaded by people that it may be in their best interest to give it a go. Despite when we sat down and said they're probably not ready yet for that, but it is about it should be athlete centered, and the athlete should be, as I say, should know about all the risks. We can never guarantee that when we think they're ready to return to training or competition that they definitely won't get re-injured, but we're confident enough in our monitoring and testing that we've done enough to say you'd be really unlucky, to get injured now because you re-injured now because of the work we've done. Similarly, that's something we often get asked by coaches. Can if they play, will they definitely get re-injured? No, it's likely, but I can't say. So it's sitting it down and saying, what do you think? If they miss this round of games, okay, and they'll be ready for the next round again. But if you push them now, they could get injured now, and that'll put them back 8 weeks rather than waiting a week. So trying to see the light. And you understand the stresses on performance directors and coaches because their funding is related to success. That if their best athletes are not available, their likelihood of success reduces. Then that's likelihood of reduction in funding. And the worst case, as we saw after Rio, some sports had all the funding taken away, which meant no jobs for the people working with the sports and no funding for the athletes. So so there's lots and lots of things to put into the mix. But ultimately, where we sit, it's doing the best for the athlete.
In terms of those funding cuts, they're always quite high profile when they're mentioned. How do you and the medical team respond to that when you see it?
So personally, again, because all our jobs are linked to a sport. So what happens is a sport says, okay, we've got our funding and we would like 2 physiotherapists to work for us full time at this level of physio, and as EIS, we interview and provide them with physios who will be managed by EIS and supported by EIS who work for a sport. So if a sport loses its funding, then there's the risk to somebody's jobs at risk. But then as a wider organisation, the organisation puts into place what it can do. So looks across the whole organisation for any jobs that are coming up. And so people who are, being put at risk or being made redundant, they'll be put forward for that job if they want to, which may mean moving half the length of the country for a job. So they're given that positively put in for an interview. Then it's up to them to do well at the interview. It's not like, rowing, we're looking for a physio. You've just lost your job with wheelchair basketball. Okay, you're going there. Okay, now we'll automatically shortlist. You go into the interview. Then it's up to you then to be the best person for the job. So it is a thing that you get used to. So I've been in 4 cycles now. So at this time of the year, back end of a funding cycle, it's all twitchy. Again, it's even more twitchy this year because the government has spent however many trillion extra. So, we're definitely not getting any more money to elite sport this year. It's like, best we could hope for will be the same funding that we've had before, but it's probably going to be a cut in funding, and then how's that divvied out through sports, and then how are the sports going to divvy that money out is difficult. So you do, as I say, you do get used to it, and we deal with it as we can, really.
Yeah, no, it's always very interesting when you see those cuts coming through. You mentioned about recruitment there, so we're recruiting this week, and I know how draining it can be. I'm feeling it already. But when you're looking for staff, either at Back in Action or EIS or any of the roles that you've had, what are the core things Is it purely clinical? What are the things you're considering?
So what we look for is, what we look what we look for at EIS is we'd like somebody who understands what it is to work in elite sport. And it sounds quite trite, but elite sport is different to doing a bit of, we have what makes a lot of us laugh is when people apply for their jobs and on their CV, the title they give themselves. So again, there's very few titles that mean anything. So I see extremely highly specialized sports physio. I'll say, so can you explain to me why highly specialized sport physio when you've never worked in elite sport? You're not a gold ACP SEM member, which you could call yourself a sports physio if you join the International Sport Physical Therapy Association. You can call yourself a sports physio. Why are you highly specialist? In my clinic we have sportsmen coming into the clinic. Yeah, so there's lots of titles. So the grander the title they come up with, the more likely we think, well, they're going to be bullshitters, aren't they? From there. So what we want is people who are keen, but we need them to understand that sport is. It's not as glamorous as it seems. You have a contract full-time 37 and a half hours a week. You think that's all you're working? Your phone's if you're embedded in a sport, your phone is never off. There's no, all right, finish at 5 o'clock, I'll turn my phone off. Weekend, no, your phones are always on. There's travel. Some of our physios who work with some sports are away over 200 days a year. So understanding, about if you've got a partner, family, how that impacts on it. If you've got if you're renting a property and 2/3 of the year you're away, what a waste of money. So one, understanding that, and then secondly, from the institute point of view, is what tends to attract people is the salary. And so if people are coming from the NHS, they look at the salary and think, oh, well, that's the next salary up from me in the NHS, and I'm ready to move up in the NHS. But our salary is nowhere near the NHS salary. So our salary, it's not massively, it's not brilliantly paid. Okay, it was probably 3 levels higher of competency that you need to get that. So people come in and look at the salary, and they're practical apps. They're like, what? I don't know. I don't even understand those words that you're saying. Never mind. I expected me to be able to do that. So that's the other thing about that. But we look for somebody who we're keen. What we're very good at, and we invest in the institute, but especially in physio, and an inordinate amount of time, is developing our physios. We have developed an M-level qualification, which is now run through UCLAN, which is the ESPA, which is the Elite Sports Physio Accreditation, which is run by in-house by EIS. As I say, accredited to M-level by UCLAN, and so we will. That's free for people to go through, and that's very intense with formative and summative assessments through there. So we will develop people, and we spend a lot of time developing people. So they've got to be keen. Nobody's the complete article when they come in, and we want to push them on. And then for me in my private practice, I want people who are keen. That they are keen on doing a good job. That they will do what it takes, put the effort and time in to do the best they can for their patient that they're seeing. If it means they need to see somebody, and it means they've got to stay until 7 o'clock at night because that's the only time the patient can get in, then they need to be able to do that. They've got to care about the patients, because that's one of the things that that we push at the practice. We will bend over backwards to do what we can if you need that treatment. But again, we will equally say, no, you don't need an appointment every day. You don't need to come in next week. You need to go away, do the rehab in 3 weeks. So again, so in practice, it's about, we say it's a little bit like IKEA. We'll do a bit, you do a bit, and together we'll make something beautiful. Okay, but just one of us doing it doesn't give us a finished product.
And Are there any particular questions that if someone asks it, it's like, no chance, they're the wrong fit?
That's first thing is, will I go to the Olympic Games? If that, then that's it, yeah. Because the likelihood of getting to the Olympic Games we've got about 70 odd physios who work in the institute, so to go to the Olympic Games as a physio, you will either go with a team if you're based with a team and you're the senior physio with that team, and then there's another opportunity where Team GB will interview and recruit about eight physios to be headquarters staff. So and to get to Team GB headquarters staff, there's loads of boxes you have got to tick to get there. And there's a lot of people who have now ticked a lot of those boxes. So it's very, very, very competitive to get into Team GB camp. But then if you're with the sport, if the sport is going to take somebody, then you might go. But some sports don't take the physios because they haven't enough accreditations to take that extra staff. So yeah, first question, if they ask about Olympic Games, that's regularly a no-no.
Yeah, that's good. And finally, are there any particular athletes that have walked through that you just thought, wow, they are impressive? Maybe not just from a physical standpoint, but just in general, mindset.
Anyone? My exposure, to several sports, it is for a great deal is limited. But I've worked, for the best part of 10 years with England squash, and the people, like Lee Beecher, who became number one, Laura Massaro, who came, Nick Matthew, they, you look at those as professionals, they do what it takes. They're dedicated they're talented people, but they work in, and they're great people, especially that sort of Nick Matthew to the back end of his career, who managed to sort of hang on with a chronic injury, been great. And then if you're just around the cyclist, that you just look at the level of training, their outputs, the brutality of it, like that, you just sit there and you're like, that's just the track cyclists, but the road cyclists, when you look at the miles they do, just thinking, the Tour de France, you're cycling 20 out of 21 days, ridiculous amounts. They just get off the bike after 12 hours. 8 hours sleep, get on and do it all again. Yeah, you're not. There's something not right with you, really, to be able to do that. Yeah, so then you get just super talented people. I remember when I worked in rugby, Danny Cipriani at 17. I worked with him. We went to the Junior Commonwealth Games. He was part of the team then, and at 17, he was a super talented rugby player. And just unfortunate, his off-field activities weren't as disciplined as his training on-field. So there's and then the other people are the Paralympians. That they are special. And what everybody needs to do is just try. Everybody needs to try any sport that looks easy, but just try. One of the things do is get somebody to get in a wheelchair and to push a wheelchair up and down for a start, and then sprint and turn, see how hard it is. Do a wheelie, see how hard it is to do a wheelie in a wheelchair without falling over and smashing your head on the floor. When you just see what they can do. Yeah, they are unbelievable, and they should be a spur to everybody, because they get on and they do it, and their disability isn't a disability, but from there they can just show us how if you put your mind to it, you can compensate and do great things.
And do you feel like that does drive you and the other medical staff on when you're working with these people?
Yeah, it's good, and as we're all, you're always told, when you come into the AIS, that you'll always be the face behind the flag, so you might work with Victoria Pendleton as physio, when she's winning all these gold medals, or Chris Hoy right there, but it's not you. It's Chris Hoy, and he's not necessarily going to turn around and say, "Oh, I'm really, really, it's all down to my physio," or whatever. Sometimes, often some well, thank you, but yeah, don't think you're going to be able to bask in their reflected glory. It's just nice to know you've got them there, and then they fulfill their potential. Our job is to get them on that line to compete, and doing that, win, lose or draw, we've done our job. After that, it's down to the athlete. Getting them there is we can take and go to bed and sleep, and it's nice if they get a medal. It's very nice if they get a medal and they acknowledge that you've been involved in their success. But what everybody's told is, you're the face behind the flag. Don't expect everybody to be gushing for you. They don't think you'll be getting any book contracts or appearances on Jonathan Ross off the back of it, because you've worked with 10 Olympic gold medalists this Olympics.
Do you ever consider any of these athletes friends then, if you're working closely with them?
It's difficult. Yeah, I am friendly with some, but I wouldn't say I'm friends, because you have to maintain that line, because at some point you're going to say things they're not happy with, like you can't play, you're not fit, you're not ready, you're not doing what I've asked you to do. So you try and be friendly with them, and all the athletes I work with have my personal phone number, so I don't mind that with it. But as much as sort of being friends, I don't socialise and things with them, because you just need to keep that. With some of the athletes, once they've retired, then that's different. We have I've got a bit more of a friendship with some of them, because we're different people now. From that. But yeah, try and keep that thing, because it does get blurred if you start being friends of what's right, and your professionality can start to change a little bit, because we're all human, and we'll go out and enjoy ourselves, have a few drinks, make a bit of a dick of ourselves like that. But if an athlete sees you doing that, that can sometimes change their opinion of you as a professional, because they see you as a professional doing a good job, but they see you out drinking, having a laugh, dancing, falling over, whatever. So again, trying to keep that separate is a good thing as well.
Yeah, no, very good. No, well, I really appreciate your time today. It's been
thank you.
Interesting delving into that. So good luck for 2021.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get there for that. That's is that still all on track? Everything's
the last I heard was that it's on, and the stipulation will be anybody who travels to Japan, and I think that's internationally will have had to have the vaccination. But if that's the case, then that'll on. But yeah, it's more than likely that it is going to take place.
Great. No, well, on that positive note, we'll finish there. But Ian, really appreciate it.
All right, great.
And see you soon. Thank you.
All right, take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.